Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to British Culture Albion Never Dies, where I'm joined once again by my friend Daniel Gaster, who you can find on Instagram at Daniel Gaster. We're talking about 60 years of Doctor Who. This is the third of 3 episodes, so this is really looking at the last 20 years of Doctor Who. We talk about the challenges and issues of Doctor Who in the modern era. We ask, is James Bond some kind of Time Lord? And we ask, what are the best modern episodes for somebody to look at if they haven't seen Doctor Who before? All that, and we start off where we left off last time by talking about a mysterious character in Doctor Who.
The last episode of the series before the specials, we're introduced to a Doctor we've not seen before. This is the Doctor that fought in the Time War, but doesn't call himself the Doctor. So between the 8th Doctor and the 9th Doctor, you have this new Doctor, which was John Hurt. Very famous British actor. He's done lots of different things. I think the things that come to mind are 1984, the film. He's done lots of voice work. He was in Merlin as the dragon.
Indiana Jones, The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
He was in that, yeah. So he's very famous British actor, and he plays the Doctor for the 50th anniversary special. Again, couldn't get the 9th Doctor in, so they've brought in this new Doctor that fought in the Time War. So it's kind of thought that the 8th Doctor and 9th Doctor fought in the Time War, but it's actually this version of the Doctor that doesn't call himself the Doctor. So it means that you don't have to worry about the numbering of the Doctors.
Okay.
So this is seen as the War Doctor. So he appears in the 50th anniversary special called The Day of the Doctor. And in this episode, it is him on the last day of the Time War. He's going to destroy the Time Lords and the Daleks with pushing one button that will kill everything, but end the war. And he has no desire. He thinks he's sacrificing himself. And this weapon has a conscience. And the conscious resembles Rose, although he obviously doesn't have any idea who Rose is at this point in time. So it's taken somebody from his future rather than his past as his conscious. But she explains, look, if you do this, the price you have to pay is that you're going to survive this. Do you want to see what that looks like? And then you see sort of the 10th Doctor and the 11th Doctor join together, and then the War Doctor comes in. And during the episode, it's sort of established what that does to him in terms of the 10th Doctor is regretting everything, everything that happened, he regrets, but it made him like the man that he is. And then the 11th Doctor, 400 years have passed. He's forgotten the answer to a question, which is how many children died that day? Something like 9.4 billion, which the 10th Doctor then has an argument with the 11th Doctor. It's widely known that the Doctors don't get on with themselves.
Yeah.
They always quiver and argue. And the War Doctor's there sort of taking this in terms of this is what the decision I do make. This is what makes of it. So at the end of this, it's I've seen everything. I'm going to go back. I still have to do this because it's needed. Great men are forged in fire. It's the privilege of lesser men to light the flame, and he's that lesser man. And then the 10th and the 11th Doctor turn up, and they say, we're going to do this with you. And it's like a poignant sort of like, this time you're not alone. And then they try to make it, and then essentially the end of this is in terms of, we don't do this. See everything around, and they say, look, after 400 years, I'm making I'm doing something very dangerous. I'm changing my mind. Don't do this. And what they come up with is concept of they're going to save Gallifrey by removing it from history, removing it from time, so it will look like it exploded. It looks like it took the Daleks with, but it will be hidden in a pocket universe somewhere. So that's the end of it in terms of they save Gallifrey, but it's hidden away. The next special is the 11th final episode, which is the time of the Doctor. Now, this is where there's a planet which is called Trenzalore, which is known as where the Doctor dies. His grave is there. It's been visited. He ends up on that planet, and there's a message coming from a crack in the wall. And this crack is a well-established thing that's gone through the 11th Doctor's history in terms of the very first episode of the 11th Doctor is this crack in the wall. And it's essentially Gallifrey calling out with a question. And they translate it, and it's Doctor Who. Doctor Who. Doctor Who. So the idea is the Doctor will say his name, which the Time Lords will all know, and it will release. Gallifrey will know that it's safe to come out of this pocket dimension. The Doctor gets trapped on the planet for hundreds and hundreds of years, so he's aged, and he comes out, and then he's still protecting the town, protecting everybody from this, so that the war doesn't start anew. And then we see him trick the companion again, and the companion comes back at the end of his life, and he is an old man now. All his regenerations are gone. A Time Lord has 13 regenerations, 12 regenerations, 13 lives, and the Doctor's used all of his. So you have the War Doctor that was the Doctor, which was him but not the Doctor, and then the 10th Doctor regenerated twice. So the 11th Doctor is essentially the last version of the Time Lord. The companion has a talk with the crack in the wall and say, you need to save him. Comes up and it gives him a new regeneration cycle. And he's able to save the day, escape the planet and everything like that. And he renews himself. He becomes a young man again, just in time to have a talk to the companion saying, look, you need to, times change and so do I. And then he regenerates again into the new version, which is Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor, which is possibly one of the oldest Doctors following a regeneration that we've seen, because it's always sort of the concept is he gets younger and younger, but he just basically changes appearance. So he could get older, he could get younger. I actually really like the 12th Doctor. He's a much older man, and he's very brash. But he's had some of the best speeches, I think, in his time. I think Stephen Moffat's writing, who's the executive producer at this point and lead writer, he had very good speeches, the 11th Doctor and the 12th Doctor. He wrote fantastic speeches to the Doctor, especially the one around war, in terms of, this isn't war. I fought in a much bigger war, and you could never, this is just a joke. Trying to get to de-escalate something in terms of like bring it down in terms of, you don't understand what you're about to do. You push a button, all these, you can't tell how many people you're going to hurt from what you do. And at the end of it, all you have to do is basically talk, and peace is the outcome of everything. You don't need to go to war for all of these things. It's the outcome. The outcome is going to be reached wherever you do it or not. It's just, can you press that button? Can you end all these lives? Can you stop these people screaming? 2017. It also, Peter Capaldi's version of the Doctor introduces the Master again, but as a woman called Missy.
Oh yes, yes.
Played by Michelle Gomez, and it's the first time we see a Time Lord change genders, which is always something that's been mentioned. Like when Patrick Troughton said, I wish whoever he or she is that replaces me, the best of luck. So there's always been this thing that he should always be a man, but they've introduced Missy as the Master, as a woman Master. I think early on to make sure that it was seen that this is something that happens. The Time Lords don't necessarily are going to be a gender specific. They can regenerate into a woman or a man. They can change races as well, as we see with the new Doctor coming up next year. So the end of Peter Capaldi's run, Jodie Whittaker is introduced, new producers, new concept music. Everything's changed in this series, and it's been it's widely renowned as the writing hasn't been as good. Now, Chris Chibnall, I think his name is, he is written in Doctor Who. He wrote Torchwood, which is a spin-off of Doctor Who. He's the person that wrote Broadchurch for ITV, again starring multiple.
David Tennant, right?
David Tennant. Jodie Whittaker was in that as Doctor. Arthur, and I can't remember his surname, but who played Rory. He was in it. So there's lots of other like Doctor companions as well in that series as well as other people that have turned like guest starred as well within Doctor Who. He's laid out the 3 years and specials. It's gone on for 2018 all the way up to last year. Quite a lot of breaks, but the writing hasn't been great, and people are sort of, again, I think it's unfair to put it on Jodie Whittaker, because I think she's acted well with what was there, if that makes sense. So I think she's not had a fair crack as such. Wasn't too much of a fan of the TARDIS interior either that they came up with as for this Doctor. And the music, I think, in this is very sort of military, which the Doctor isn't. He's sort of very anti-military, even though, with everything that goes on. So last year was the centenary of the BBC. So they had a special last, I want to say August, which was the last episode with Jodie Whittaker, again facing off against a master who was regenerated into a man again, and who was impersonating Rasputin.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, sort of figures in history are also sort of mimicked by the Master as well. Apparently, the Master was Rasputin. End of the 13th Doctor's life, and she regenerates into the 14th Doctor, which we believed was going to be Kuti Gatwa, who is going to be the 15th Doctor, the first Black Doctor as well, but regenerated into David Tennant again. So David Tennant is playing the 14th Doctor this year for the 60th anniversary specials, which will be out sort of next month or in November. A trailer came out last week for the episodes. It reintroduces Donna Noble, who was the companion that he had to wipe his memory from because she had Time Lord knowledge that was going to kill her. So that it reintroduces that, and Neil Patrick Harris is playing the title villain, who probably know from How I Met Your Mother, who played Barney, who was a guy in a suit, always wore a suit. He's playing a character called the Toy Maker. Now, I mentioned this earlier in the first Doctor serial where he vanished. He fought against a character called the Celestial Toy Maker, who was played by, at that point, Michael Gough, who went on to play Alfred in the Batman films. So this is the first reintroduction of that character since 1966 on TV. Again, he's been portrayed by other actors on audio as well. But yeah,
they are playing the long game with this one.
They do reintroduce in the new series. There's very popular characters that they've new characters like the Weeping Angels. That's a very popular one, which are stone angels that can only move when they're not being observed, and if you blink, they move very, very quickly, and they kill you by displacing you in time and using the potential of your lifespan as their energy of that they feed on. I'm trying to think of other ones. The Ood, again, they're a very familiar sort of. They've got like spaghetti coming out of their mouth.
Like you forget them as soon as they're gone, right?
No, that was the Silence. They kind of resemble almost like the Roswell alien thing.
Oh yeah.
But again, you're right. They, if they're not observed, as soon as you look away from them, you've forgotten that they exist. Again, they were a character within the 11th Doctor's outings. So yes, but they've reintroduced the Sontarans, the Great Intelligence. This is the first time that they've reintroduced the Toy Maker. Obviously, familiar ones like the Dalek, Cyberman, and Master, they've all come back. The Autons, not the Autons, that was reintroduced with Christopher Eccleston. But yeah, lots of new. They're trying to mix new with some of the older classic ones, and they seldomly use a lot of the classic ones, mostly sort of steering towards like the big three. But yeah, they have reintroduced lots of different villains over the course of the new series, which has now been 13 series over the course of, what is it? We're coming up to 20 years almost. So lots of like series and lots of gaps in this stint of Doctor Who's history. I mean, there's been concepts within the last series that the Doctor actually isn't a Time Lord, in terms of she was a child found by a Gallifreyan explorer that weren't Time Lords at this point in time, and an accident happened and this child regenerated into another child. So they worked on this child and got the concept of regeneration from that, and essentially the Doctor had a life, lots of regenerations prior to the first Doctor. Now, lots of people aren't happy with this sort of concept that the Doctor is essentially much older, so much older that she is older than the entire race of her, of Time Lords, and that everything that the Time Lords built and everything, they cap regenerations at 12 and so on and so forth, stemmed from what they call the Timeless Child, and the Timeless Child is the Doctor. it's a bit, they've introduced this character as a renegade doctor, played by Jo. I can't remember her name. She was in Casualty or Holby City, and she was again a female black doctor, but a doctor that they don't recognize each other, and they're thinking one's from their past and one's from the future. But it turns out that she is from a past from way before anything that we're aware of Gallifrey and everything. So again, interesting concepts about the Doctor's mythology, history, and everything like that. Not sure how things like that are going to go forward. The concept of all this history is kept in a fob watch, much like when I said earlier about the Master sort of hiding and making himself human. His essence was kept in a fob watch. So all of this Doctor's history is in this fob watch that the once found the Doctor hid in the TARDIS and said, "Only can I find you if I really need it," to the TARDIS, and the TARDIS has hidden it somewhere within it. Whether or not that will pop up again in the new series. So Russell T Davies is back. So he has come back to produce the new Doctor. So he's producing these specials with David Tennant and Catherine Tate. That stemmed from a conversation saying, wouldn't it be great if we could do this again? And he's like, well, I'm taking over. So put the concept. So this is where the 360th specials have come in. And the Doctor, so it's supposed to be a surprise, the 14th Doctor reappearing. But he will swiftly go, and the 15th Doctor will merge with Kuti Gatwa as the first Black Doctor, if you don't count the Renegade Doctor.
Very interesting.
It's such a vehicle for change and everything in terms of everything. One of the things I think when growing up was this what happens to James Bond? He just regenerates every so often. It's kind of, it's the actor, but it's the same person. Up until sort of Daniel Craig, that version of James Bond was the same, just different face and slightly different style. Yeah. But you'd see that James Bond and Doctor Who is alike. They change, their outfits change. It's a wide difference from how Roger Moore dressed to Sean Connery. So they're, it's a different outtake on and almost persona, but it's the same person.
Yeah. I feel Tom Baker is the Roger Moore of Doctor Who.
Probably. I mean, from a longevity point of view, because Roger Moore was the longest serving James Bond in terms of films and time, probably about the same stint as Tom Baker. Yeah, a bit of a bohemian as Tom Baker's character. I'm not sure I could say the same about James Bond's characters.
They're different characters, but you can see, is James Bond a Time Lord is a good one.
And again, longevity. The James Bond movie franchise is only a year older, and it's had gaps. Like we had a 16-year gap between the end of the Sylvester McCoy era and the beginning of the Christopher Eccleston era, but there's also gaps. Like there's been a gap now for the last year. And a few months until the 60th special. So that's why we're only on series 13, even though it's been going on since 2005, and we're now at 2023. So James Bond has had a fair amount of gaps in coming from the end of the 80s. Actually, that does actually work. So from 1989, there was a gap of 6 years between films, and then we've had subsequent gaps between Daniel Craig eras as well.
Yeah. So there are similarities,
but they're vastly different. Like you said, vastly different characters, but British institutions they both are.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for sharing all about Doctor Who. Again, we've got some recommendations for classic episodes to jump into. For the modern, I say the last 20 years, is it worth jumping into the Rose episode first, or are there other entry points?
I think, the Rose is a good one. I think Christopher Eccleston plays a very good Doctor. I think definitely Rose is a good one to start with. I think Bad Wolf and Parting of the Wave, which are the last two episodes of the Eccleston era, are very good episodes as well. For David Tennant era, there's so much I quite like about the David Tennant era. But what they introduced in both the David Tennant era were Doctor Light episodes, so they were producing 14 episodes a year, 13 with the Doctor, and then these light ones. So you've got Blink, which was in the third series. Again, this is a Doctor Light episode. It's got Carey Mulligan in it, who's a very famous actress now, who's in The Great Gatsby and other films. I think it's one of her sort of breakout roles. It's a Doctor Light episode with Weeping Angels, but it's such a really good episode. But again, not much of the Doctor. Sound of Drums with The Last of the Time Lords for at the end of that series is really good. I think The End of Time, which is the part 2, which is the end of the Tennant era, which is a really powerful arc and that ends his story as well. I think other ones going into the 11th Doctor, Vincent and the Doctor is a really wonderful story back with Vincent van Gogh. Talks about the Vincent's struggles, how thinking that we could change his life and he'll be good for the better, but adding to it's a very powerful message within that. I won't spoil that one. Going into the series 7, I think again, like Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS is a really good episode where it's a very TARDIS centric one. So they've had to build. Usually, you just have the console room. And that's it. You don't see anything else. But this leads into lots of different aspects of the TARDIS. And then the name of the Doctor, the time of the Doctor, and the day of the Doctor, which is those sort of 3-story arc towards the end of the 11th Doctor era. Really good stories. Good to know about the history of it as well, I think, as well. 12th Doctor, I can't, everything that the 12th Doctor did, I thought I loved, really. Even though David Tennant is my favourite, the 12th Doctor's episodes I thought were particularly strong. In Series 9, I would watch the Zygon Invasion and the Saigon Inversion, which they had at the end of that. It has those beautiful speeches within that about war and everything and how that affected the Doctor. I think they're good. In Series 9, Heaven Sent and Hell Bent. Heaven Sent is an episode which is basically the Doctor on his own in his own prison, and he has to get out. Basically, the end of this episode is that there's a great wall of crystal which is harder than anything substance known to man, and he can't get through. But that's the exit. He has to tell the truth about some knowledge that he has, and he won't do it. So essentially, he is whacking it with his fist. He dies. He's just got enough energy to go back to the teleporter, where there's a pattern of himself in it, re-energize that, and a new version comes out, and basically he keeps living the same day again and again and again and again for 4 billion years to get to the other side of this crystal thing. It's such a powerful episode, and it's him on his own doing it, talking to himself, talking to a version of the companion that's just died. Again, another companion that's died within this. A fantastic episode, Heaven Sent, and leads into Hell Bent, which is him on Gallifrey, going, "Why have you done this? How dare you?" I think there's quite a lot there. The last episode of the 12th Doctor's run is called Twice Upon a Time, and that has the first Doctor in it, played by David Bradley. Now, David Bradley is, again, a very famous English actor. He's done lots of things all over the place. Harry Potter, he's been in. He's been in
Harry Potter, isn't he? He's the creepy caretaker.
He is. He was in Broadchurch. He was in a series in the US. I can't think it was called. It's like a vampire series where I can't think what it's called now. It's a very famous book, and again, my memory's just not that good. But he played everything I was talking about the first Doctor, about William Hartnell as a character. For the 50th anniversary special, they brought out this documentary called, well, not a documentary as such, but it was a dramatization of the first few series with William Hartnell as the Doctor, called An Adventure in Space and Time. And it portrays William Hartnell's journey through him before they sort of push him out as being the Doctor. That's a really good sort of, I think it's about an hour long, but it's a really good history of how the series started, how it was produced at that point in history, why William Hartnell loved the character so much, and ultimately why William Hartnell had to leave. But he portrayed William Hartnell as the Doctor, and in Twice Upon a Time, he is now playing the first Doctor with the 12th Doctor. That's a really good episode, and it's sort of the 12th Doctor's come to the end of his life. He's got a new series. He's got all these new regenerations, but he's like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't keep being other people. I am not going to regenerate. And the TARDIS takes him to Antarctica, which is essentially when the first Doctor is about to regenerate as well. And this is something that the Doctor has forgotten, was the first Doctor is going, I know myself. I am not going to regenerate. And it's just that sort of coming together. So the first Doctor goes, actually, I am going to generate. If I do not go on, all of these things will undo, and it's important that I continue. And I think the 12th Doctor at the end begins to realise, well, maybe one more go around is okay. But it's again a fantastic episode. It's the end of the 12th Doctor. It's the end of Stephen Moffat being in charge of the show. So great episode for that one as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I feel we are fully up to speed on Doctor Who. Thank you very much. You have shared a lifetime's worth of knowledge.
Probably too much. And I've just outed myself as a Whovian, but there you go.
No, when I went to London Comic Con, it's only the second Comic Con I've been to, and I was shocked. Like half the people there were dressed as Doctor Who. But even though I must confess, I'm not a huge follower, right? It's in the ether. It's part of our cultural furniture. Even with my casual knowledge, I could immediately identify who everybody was as which Doctor.
They are usually recognizable. Yes.
Yeah, and then I got to meet Sylvester McCoy, who is full of energy.
I've met Sylvester McCoy and Paul McGann, and yeah. They're really, for their ages, Sylvester McCoy, he's such a character. He's got loads of stories. He loves to still, even to this day. He does the Big Finish, like I said earlier, in terms of like he continues to be the Doctor. He argues that he was never fired, so he's technically still the Doctor. He's the Doctor.
Yeah. He's great with the fans, he was able to draw people out of themselves and get them involved with some of his kind of little stage performances. I think he's so great. And
like I said, Sylvester McCoy is technically my entry point. So 1989, I was about 5. And like I say, he's probably one of my first memories that I remember of watching TV and watching Doctor Who. So Battlefield was the episode, was the series arc. Sophie Aldred, who played Ace, was the companion. And there's this scene where she's about to be sort of submerged in water and drown, and that was the end of the episode. I remember she was also a presenter on children's TV, and she was like, "It's okay, I'm only an actress playing in that. I'm okay, not really going to, But then years later, when you sort of like watch the thing, that there was an accident with that, and it broke, and she could have actually died in that because the thing malfunctioned. And Sylvester McCoy, he always says that he was to be a superhero, and he was a superhero because he had to yell to them to pull her out before something happened. Wow.
Yes. And I was asking the question earlier about whether the Doctor Who would fire a gun or something, because Sylvester McCoy told a story that in one of the episodes it was written that he should fire a rocket launch or something, and he just didn't like it, and so they're basically like, give it to the girl.
Yeah, give it to Ace. Yeah, essentially he fights with his wits. His weapons are books, knowledge, enabling others to do what is right rather than. But essentially, that was his crime. Why he was sentenced on Gallifrey was because he became involved, and continues to be involved even up to this point in time. He's still not learnt his lesson, but continually being involved. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's been a great pleasure, genuinely, for me to learn all about Doctor Who.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode. Daniel Gaster can be found on Instagram at Daniel Gaster. Thank you to those who've recently signed up to my newsletter. One chap, Sam, even given me his address so I could send him a postcard. So thank you very much. If you're interested, just look at the show notes. You can click the link, sign up, and you can also just go to the show notes to click the link to find Daniel Gaster's Instagram. Thank you very much for listening once again, and I hope you enjoyed it.